Some say it's a controversy. Others say it's a conspiracy. It's all about non-citizens voting in American elections. Well, the New York State Court just had a ruling on that, and you might be surprised about the outcome. We have attorney Bobbie Ann Cox talking about that this week on the State of Greater Western New York Report, which, as always, is brought to you by the wonderful people at Each Week. Our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Menden Honeylight Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome back, everyone, to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa. With us today is Bobbie Ann Cox. She's an attorney at Cox Attorneys, and she knows a lot about what's going on in New York State. Bobbie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
All right, well, thanks for being with us. Well, let's get right to the topic that we're talking about. Tell us a little bit about this court case where the judge ruled that the immigrants, or that unregistered people or people who aren't citizens, cannot vote in New York State. How did that come about? Who brought it about? And how did we get to where we are now?
Yes, so this started back in 2021, where the New York City Council passed a law which was for New York City only. But basically, that law said that non-citizens could vote in their elections, meaning their New York City elections. And almost immediately, a group of Republicans sued over that because that is unconstitutional. Our New York State Constitution clearly says in plain language that only citizens can vote in our elections. So the Republicans brought this lawsuit against the New York City Council and Mayor Adams because he signed that bill into law. And that this was in 2022, and they actually had a victory at the trial court level. So the Republicans won. The trial court judge said, no, you cannot do this. This is a clear violation of the Constitution. It is not even slightly questionable. Our Constitution is crystal clear. Now, then, once they lost, Mayor Adams and the New York City Council appealed that decision. They didn't like the answer that they got from the trial court judge, so they appealed. And we just got a ruling not long ago, I think last month it was, that said, from the appellate court, that said, nope, the trial court is right here. Non-citizens are not allowed to vote in our elections. You have to be a citizen. So now there is one more court, which would be the Court of Appeals, which is our highest court in New York State. So it's unclear still whether or not Mayor Adams and the New York City Council are going to try to appeal this case again to try and get up to the highest court. We haven't heard anything yet on that, but there is that one last level of appeal. So this will be very interesting to see whether or not they appeal. And then if they do appeal, what does the Court of Appeals say? That is our highest court in New York State. It's 7 judges that sit on that bench, all of whom are appointed by governors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But this is not something that you can do. A legislature, whether it's a city legislature or a county legislature or even the state legislature, they don't have the power to change our Constitution. Our Constitution can only be changed by a specific process, which first goes through our state legislature and then goes to a vote of the people. So the citizens of New York State get to vote if whether or not we want to change our constitution. So yeah, this was a clear breach of the Constitution when the New York City Council did this.
So the average person is probably thinking, what were they thinking? Meaning the New York City Council. What were they thinking? Do you have any idea why, what justification they offered as a to explain why they passed this resolution?
Well, I don't know their underlying reasoning. There are things you can read in the news about why they claim that they want non-citizens to have the right to vote. But if you think about what's going on right now in our nation and specifically in New York State, we have sanctuary state status. So a lot of people know that New York City has declared themselves a sanctuary city, but a lot of people don't know that New York State has declared itself a sanctuary state, the whole state. So what we have is illegal immigrants coming to our state. Of course, this is being perpetuated by Biden and his administration because they are not enforcing our immigration laws, which we've had on the books for a very long time. They're refusing to enforce the laws. So they are allowing millions of unvetted people to illegally enter our country from our southern border. It's also happening at our northern border, but the southern border is the worst. And they come into the country illegally, and then Biden is using your tax dollars to ship these illegal immigrants all over the country. Many are coming to New York because, again, New York is a sanctuary state. And so, and now Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams, but Governor Hochul is saying that they're going to hire these illegal immigrants. They shouldn't even be in our country. They didn't come in through the proper procedures. And now she's going to hire them and give them jobs. And they're already giving them free food, free housing, free medical, free education for their children. And they started handing out, with our tax dollars here in New York State, they started handing out debit cards paid for by the taxpayers, by the citizens. They're handing out debit cards to the illegal immigrants so that they can do whatever they want, buy things, go shopping, who knows what they're going to do with it. So when you have that kind of an incentive for people to come here, of course they're going to come here in droves. And then they're thinking, well, we should give them the right to vote, because who do you think they're going to vote back into power time and time again? They're going to vote the Democrats back into power over and over again, because the Democrats are the ones that are giving them all of these free handouts from, soup to nuts. And so that's, in my opinion, really why they want to have a law that allows illegal immigrants and legal immigrants. They want to put them all in one category and say, oh, yep, any non-citizen should be allowed to vote. No, that's not the way it works. Absolutely not. Our Constitution is very clear. So yeah, this is going on right underneath our noses, and a lot of people don't even know about it.
This brings up several questions, but one of them is school board elections or school elections. How do you tell if a person is a citizen? Because from the way I remember voting is you just go, put your address where you live and your name, and vote. How are those elections going to monitor this?
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. Is it's very difficult to keep track of who is allowed to vote and who isn't. So even if let's say that their ordinance stood, let's say that New York City got away with it, and they said, non-citizens can vote in our local elections, whether it's school board, whether it's city council, whatever. How do you try to enforce that when those people also try and fill out the ballot to say, yeah, well, I'm going to vote for the, state senator. I'm going to vote for the state assembly member. I'm going to vote for the president. How could you possibly enforce that? It would be extremely difficult, because what, the poll workers are going to do that? Are they going to separate out the different ballots depending on whether or not you are legally allowed to vote, whether or not you are a citizen? I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it's unconstitutional, right? Our New York State Constitution does not allow non-citizens to vote. Whether you're here legally or not, you're not allowed. It's only citizens. So yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think it would be chaos if they did try to implement something like that, but they're not even allowed to because our Constitution prohibits that.
We just had an interesting comment that I'm going to save for after the break because I want to ask this question first, and that is, you mentioned that we are a sanctuary state, and you're right. A lot of people don't realize that it is the entire state, not just New York City. In terms of local municipalities, do they have any rights in terms of combating this problem, or does the state usurp those local rights and, in effect, force them to accept illegal immigrants?
You know, local, I have seen some counties, right? So the county legislature or the county executive, some counties in New York State are saying that they will not accept illegal immigrants coming from wherever, whether they're coming directly from the border, whether they're coming from New York City, because Mayor Adams was or perhaps still is, I'm not sure, putting these illegal immigrants on buses and busing them to other counties. So I have seen county level government standing up and saying, nope, sorry, we have declared a state of emergency. We already have too many illegal immigrants in this county. We are not accepting any more. Or they're just declaring state of emergency. You know, the problem here is that, you know, the Democrats, both at the federal level, because like I said, the Biden administration is promulgating all of this and encouraging all of this. They come right out and say we should have no borders, which is horrendous. You can't have a country without borders. That is very obvious. But whether it's at the federal level or it's at the New York State level, it's very obvious that these Democrats, because again, remember, Democrats control, obviously Biden, they control the White House, but they also control the New York State legislature 100%. Our New York State legislature right now is supermajority Democrat in both houses, in the Senate and the Assembly. Governor Hochul is Democrat. The Attorney General, Letitia James, is Democrat. So it is Mayor Adams is Democrat. The New York City Council is a supermajority Democrat. So right now, New York State and New York City is one party rule, and it's extremely dangerous, because that means all of the citizens in this state who don't agree with Democrat policies are being ruled under Democrat policy. They are not having their voices heard. This is why it's so important for people to vote this November. We have the entire New York State legislature, all 213 members of the New York State legislature are up for election on November 5th. So people need to really pay attention. They need to get out and vote, and they need to get everybody they know to come out and vote, because it's also a presidential election this year.
Well, when we come back, we're going to have a quote from Ben Franklin that will introduce another question to Bobbie Ann Cox. But let's take a quick break for this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. "50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York." Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Well, welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Caroso. With us today is Bobbie Ann Cox, who is very knowledgeable about many things when it comes to voting and rights in the New York State area. Bobbie, we have a quote here from Mark that I thought was kind of interesting. It's from Ben Franklin. He said, "When the people find that they can vote themselves money, that will herald the end of the republic. Sell not liberty to purchase power." Now we know that it's illegal to buy votes directly, uh, but we see this a lot, both at the state level and the national level. Has anyone ever tested the legal nature of this sort of self-interested voting? It makes sense. You can't necessarily blame the voters if they're allowed to do it. If anything, you blame the legislators. Has anyone tested that to see if it really is allowable?
Uh, you're referring to what? People doing what?
The idea that a
I'm not
legislature,
sure.
Joe Biden giving away free uh, student loans in hopes of getting those people to vote for him. Is anybody, I mean, I know that was tested, but that was tested more on a technicality. But I'm talking more about this quid pro quo, this virtual vote buying. Has any lawyer ever tested that?
Yeah. So any time that you have the government do something, like you're saying, oh, we're going to forgive student loans. Or here in New York State, I don't know if you recall, but before the gubernatorial election 2 years ago, when Kathy Hochul was running for governor, um, she did a property tax refund to property owners, and it came. I think it was like 3 or 4 months before the election, right? It just so happened that they decided to do this program. And so, a lot of people were up in arms because they were like, well, hold on a second here. She's basically, buying votes. She's saying, oh, yeah, you know what? We took a little too much money from you. Oh, we're going to give some back. It just happened to conveniently be a few months before she was on the ballot to be governor. Because remember, she became governor only because Cuomo had stepped down in August of 2021. So she had never actually won an election. And so she was running for the first time for governor in 2022. So anyway, but yeah, that is really something that is a problem because, and that whole thing with Biden and him forgiving, quote unquote, forgiving student loans, he's not forgiving anything. He's using our tax dollars as Americans to subsidize other people's education, right? Which is socialism, right? We don't operate under that system here, but he's doing it anyway. That went up to the United States Supreme Court, and if you recall, they ruled against him. They said, you do not have the power. You are the president. You don't have the power to absolve people from paying back loans that they took out to get an education. And what is he doing? He's doing it anyway.
So
So
yeah,
he's literally defying the United States Supreme Court.
I'm interested because you anticipated another question that we had, and that is, how does he get away with that? How does he do that? Is there he can't be directly violating the Supreme Court, right? There has to be some loophole that he's using to do what he's doing. Is that right, or am I just misreading it?
Yeah, I think I read that he had them change some wording somewhere or something to allow him to do it anyway. But you know that it's still defying the United States Supreme Court, is it not? I mean, are we going to split hairs
Well,
and
certainly
say
one can argue that the
this word?
spirit of the court's ruling has been denied, but yeah, I'm
Of
not a
course.
lawyer, so I don't know. You change a word in something, and maybe now the Supreme Court now has to rehear it based on that word changing. That's my very naive guess about
Yeah, but
what's
right,
going
but
on.
that's not the spirit of the decision. That's not
Hmm.
the spirit of what was being said. And so, how do you stop a president that doesn't abide by anything, that defies our Constitution, who promotes an invasion of our country? Well, you vote him out. That is absolutely what you do. And, when people vote for, let's say, people don't even think about this, I'm sure. When you vote for governor here in New York State, you are not just voting for the person who's going to run the executive branch. You're also voting for the person that's going to appoint our appellate judges. So that is a huge responsibility, and that is a very powerful thing to be able to do. The judges decide the cases, which makes case law, which are the laws that we have to live under here in New York. So when you elect a governor, you're also electing the person who's going to decide who's sitting on the bench. Now, our trial court judges are elected by the people. But once you go up to the appellate courts, no, those are all appointed judges appointed by governors. And, same thing with the president. You're not just voting for a president who's going to sit there and run the White House and run the government from the executive position. The president gets to appoint federal judges. And that's all levels of federal judge. That's the trial court level, the appeal in between, and then the United States Supreme Court. So again, very powerful position. And people need to think about that when they are going to vote for whether it's governor or president. The executive has more power than you might originally think.
We had another question in from the live audience. By the way, if you are a member of the live audience, feel free to ask a question in the question and answers portion of this call. And if you're not a member of the live audience, I'll tell you at the end how you could be. But this question is, how can we stop the New York State government leaders from encouraging illegal immigrants to come here other than voting them out? Are there legal remedies that can be pursued that have not yet been tried? How's that for a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That would take some significant research to see if there are legal pathways. But lawsuits are not the answer, folks. I have a couple lawsuits going right now against New York State. One is the quarantine camp lawsuit against Governor Hochul and her Department of Health, which is a rather popular and closely followed case. And, lawsuits take time, a lot of time. I mean, I'm already 2 years into that quarantine lawsuit. Lawsuits take money, right? Who's funding these cases? Well, in the case of the quarantine lawsuit, I'm funding it, right? I'm doing it pro bono, which is not sustainable. They take resources. So, working on a case pro bono that I'm funding, I can't go and bring other cases because I'm working on this one. But then if I can't bring other cases, I can't bring money into my firm. So then I can't do more cases. Lawsuits are not sustainable. Even if someone's funding the lawsuits, they take a lot of time, a lot of energy. They take attorneys that are willing to bring these cases and go against the grain. The answer is voting out the people that are making these laws, which are horrendous. They are horrendous laws. A lot of the laws and regulations from the agencies here in New York State violate our Constitution. People don't know that because if you think about it, they're not teaching the Constitution in schools anymore, right? There are no longer civics classes. I mean, a lot of schools don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. So, we are seeing this push to have a population that doesn't even know what their rights are. And so when the government oversteps and when the government does something that they're not supposed to do, and they take a power from the people, a lot of times the people don't even realize that the government isn't supposed to be doing that in the first place. So it's super, super important that we not only in November vote for people who think like us and honor the Constitution and will uphold the Constitution and fight for the Constitution, but we have to also try to educate other people around us. because it's not just enough for us to go and vote. We have to educate others and say, hey, listen, do you know what's going on in New York State? Do you know that the supermajority Democrat-led legislature, passed a law last year that said that criminals can have their rap sheets wiped clean, and you won't get to see that person has a rap sheet, has criminal background. Do you know that the New York State legislature passed a law 2 years ago which says that if you want to become a member of the New York State legislature, you're not allowed to have an outside job that makes more than $32,000 a year? That is completely unconstitutional. I mean, that's like saying, well, you can only be a member of the New York State legislature if you own property. I mean, no, absolutely not. But they do these things. They pass these laws, the whole quarantine camp regulation that came through the Department of Health. They have absolutely zero authority to make that regulation, but they did it anyway. There's this terrible attitude of catch me if you can. I'm not allowed to do this. I know I don't have the power to do this. I'm going to do it anyway. And hey, come catch me if you can. Bring a lawsuit, sue me, try and stop me. Let's see what the judge says. And if I don't like what the judge says, I'm going to appeal the decision anyway. It's this whole cat and mouse, and we have to stop it. And the way to stop it is to vote these people out of office, 1,000%. We wouldn't have to be fighting these fights. I wouldn't have to be bringing these lawsuits if we had people running this state and running our counties and running our cities who would just simply honor the Constitution. So the power of the ballot is very, very strong. Even though I'm a litigator, I'm a big proponent of voting in the right people. It's really important.
This is an oddball question, but it's based on what you said about restricting outside income for anybody sitting in the legislature. I've always thought an idea might be to restrict the payment of legislators to say what they earned on the average the last 3 years prior to be voting in on any non-government job. So in other words, you can't get paid more than what you earned in a non-government job on average 3 years prior to serving in the legislature. Is that also problematic for the same reason that you mentioned before, or is that a potential idea?
Yeah, I mean, according to the Democrat-led supermajority in the New York State legislature, they can limit or not limit whatever they want. The problem with that, the law that they passed, which, by the way, they did that in the same law, they gave themselves another 30% pay raise. So now in New York State, we, the taxpayers, are paying every New York State senator and New York State assembly member $142,000 a year in a salary, plus they get benefits and per diems and stuff. And they work from January until the first week of June. So it is a part-time job, which it is supposed to be part-time job in New York State. We are supposed to have a citizen legislature, which means we're supposed to have people in Albany who, once they're done legislating from January to the first week of June, then go back to their homes, their different parts of the state, and they live amongst us and they work amongst us, and they are supposed to be one of us. And the reason for that is because you don't want to have a political elite class. You don't want people making laws that they don't have to live by, right? But now that's what they've done with this law that they passed, which they passed, by the way, when they called a special session in December during Hanukkah, a couple days before Christmas, when nobody was paying attention to it. They did that in December of 2022. And so you want those people who are making the laws that we have to all live by, you want them to have to work side by side with you. You want them to have to own a small business. You want them to know the implications of a tax increase that they might pass, or a rule about who they could hire or not hire. You want them to be subjected to and have to live under the same laws that we do. And that way, they're going to advocate for us in a more forceful manner. If they don't have to have a job in the real world and they can just live off we the people at $142,000 a year, and then they get the other 6 months of the year off and they don't have to work, they are going to become beholden to their party for re-election. They are going to become beholden to the special interest that pay them or fund their campaigns. They're going to become beholden to them because now they're 100% reliant on that government paid income, their salary for being a legislator. So why would they listen to the people in their district, the people they're supposed to represent, if a special interest group says, we want you to vote this way, not that way, and they're the ones funding your campaign, right? Or your party boss is saying, well, we're going to put this law up for a vote or this bill up for a vote, and we need you to vote with us on this. If you go against them, well, they're just going to find somebody to primary you and knock you out, right? So it's a terrible, terrible thing to not allow people, regular citizens like you and me, to go and serve in the New York State legislature. It's horrible, but they did it.
Yep.
They did it, and nobody knows about it.
Well, they do now. I put up
Hopefully
the little ticker there below me tells you how you could be a member of the live audience. Just go to the website, stateof.greaterwesternewyork.com, and sign up. You'll get a free invitation every Thursday when the show airs. It's no cost to sign up, no cost to attend. If you're a member of the live audience, you get to ask questions of our guests. Now, I realize this occurs during lunch on Thursdays at noon. So if you'd like to see the replay, this show is archived on our website, stateof.greaterwesternewyork.com. And it is rebroadcast every Sunday at 1:30 on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Just like the page, subscribe to the channel, and those platforms will notify you when the show airs. Bobbie Ann, thank you very much for being with us today. And I'm sure that we'll have you on again in the future as we get more news on what's going on in New York State. Bye-bye for now.